Good evening. We still have some people making their way down, so we will wait just a couple minutes and then we'll get started. All right. Good evening. It looks like we still have a few coming in, but we will go ahead and get started. I know everybody has a very busy lives and a lot going on, and most people do. We'll kind of get this started here. Do you want to make a plug for the play that's coming up? Is it a musical or a play, Brian? Musical. So you can see it's kind of set up back here for that. Little Mermaid, correct? And it's going to be in 2 Thursdays, so it'll be on the 17th. So that's the opening night. So if you haven't seen one of our productions at the high school, it is just incredible, the amount of time and effort that goes into that production. Our students, you'll get, they'll knock your socks off how talented they are, and the level of production that they put on it's not a high school play. I mean, it's top notch. So if you get a chance to come to that, certainly recommend it. Volleyball playing tonight, so I'll make a plug for them as well. So if you get a chance to cheer on or send some good vibes their way, they're playing tonight. Football tomorrow night here, so that'll also be streamed live on hls.media, so you can check that out as well. And then cross-country teams are going Saturday, so a lot of great things happening here late in the fall sports season, so check those out. All right, we'll go ahead and get started, and then make introductions as we go. So our school counselors this year, we're fortunate to have a new team member with us, Mrs. Rains. We'll be working with the students A through F. Mrs. Lakins, who was back in the corner there, she was helping to try to get some handouts together out there to try to get people in here a little quicker with the line. If we run out of handouts, this is going to be online as well, so we'll have those available. There'll be a link, and then we'll have plenty of copies in the counseling office too, so your student can come in and grab a copy of that. The most important, I think, are the first 2 pages. They're all very important, but that first page is that checklist. We'll talk about that in a little bit, and that second page is the intent. So those are 2 very important pages to that. Mrs. Colbo, jumping ahead of myself there, not able to make it tonight. She works with students M through R, and I'm Mr. Addington working with students S through Z. Probably the 2 most important people in our team there in the counseling office is Mrs. Gamoff, who has just a tremendous amount of knowledge and support and really keeps us functioning properly there. And it's kind of cut off on the bottom, but Mrs. Grasenic also splits her time between the main office and our counseling office, so we're glad to have her helping out as well. Just hit that November 1st deadline for our seniors. So many of you will have that coming up here soon, next couple years. And that's a huge deadline. I think Mrs. Gamoff said we were close to 1,000 applications already. There's another December 1st deadline coming up, so they're cranking out these applications. So far so good. Everything's going through smoothly, but that's another meeting. All right, we always recommend that parents, students sign up for the e-communication. This became big the last couple years. We weren't able to have these meetings in person, and so if you get a chance to sign up for those, you can sign up for high school, you can do middle school. I'm still getting Granger in middle school because I can't quite figure out how to unsubscribe. I don't want to subscribe to the high school stuff, but I'll figure that out eventually. But you can sign up for these, and anytime those email blasts go out, you'll get those, and many of you might have gotten that phone call last night from Mrs. Knapp, so we really appreciate her doing that. Nice crowd, so I think we were able to get the word out. We try in many different ways. I know we could still probably improve in that area, and we're looking at other ways to get information out to people, but looks like we got it out pretty well this time. So deadlines, very important for CCP. Kind of the way this is going to work tonight is I'm just going to talk a little bit about Highland's part of it and how the process works from like the counseling department's perspective. We have Greg Derringer here, who is from the University of Akron, kind of the guru. It's the person that I call when I have questions on what's going on, stuff's new or changed. There's always updates to the program from the state level. Then Danielle Schwager, did I say it right? Oh, I got it this time, from Tri-C. And those are the 2 main schools that our students go to. There are a handful of students that go to some other ones, but those are the 2 main ones. So that's why we invite them here. It's more just proximity for our students to travel to those schools and the connection that they have just because they're closer. The campus up there by Brunswick High School. So those of you living in the northern part of the district, that's pretty close. And then University of Akron is not too far, and they have the Medina campus over there just south of town. And then also the Wayne branch isn't too far either. So lots of places to be able to access these classes. So the first deadline is going to be that intent to participate, and that's on that second page. And I know it says April 1st everywhere you look, but April 1st is on a Saturday in the spring. So the last day that they can turn it into our office is March 31st, because we're not planning on being here on April 1st. So if they can, everybody can get that in. So here's the trick on that, though. You can turn that in tonight. You can turn that in tomorrow. It doesn't obligate you to participate in the program. It's just one part that leaves that option open for you. So my recommendation is always just turn that in right away. If you have any idea at all, or even if you don't, turn it in. It's not going to hurt anything. So that's something to definitely think about. We'd be happy to, if you want to rip that one out on your way out and hand it to us, we'd be happy to start a pile. If you want to have your student drop it off tomorrow, I know, keep the laughter down. But we'd be happy to take that tonight as well. So application deadlines are going to vary by college. It's also going to vary by semester, but that intent doesn't vary. That is that April 1st, or in this case, March 31st. And then transcript requests are going to be through Naviance, and the school counselor can help the student through that. And that's how the seniors will be requesting their transcripts, letters of recommendation, letting us know how they are applying, be able to look at scholarships on Naviance. So that becomes a really great tool. Right now, your students can be using that for college and career exploration. They can look at sometimes if they want to play around with that, and we're going to try to get in the classrooms, do more of this year, some interest inventories, some personality tests to see some matches. That's one of the questions we often get is, when do you talk to the students about what they should be looking at? And that's in that Naviance. That's how we do it. So they can do those interest inventories and see what careers kind of match up to what their talents are and their interests. So that's a really good tool for that. A lot of you can take some virtual tours of schools, lots of links to the colleges as well. So the most important item, I think, is meeting with the counselor. Advise. So we want to meet with your student about CCP. It's a great program for a lot of students. Some, it doesn't benefit as much as others, but it's definitely a great program that's offered. We don't discourage it for anyone, but we just want to make sure that you're able to optimize your time in high school, and so CCP is one of those ways of doing that. So what you're going to do is the student will meet with the counselor before all that stuff gets turned in. So we actually have a form that we started a couple years ago just to emphasize that. So we want the students to turn that in to show that they met with their counselor to talk about the CCP program. That's on page like 3 or 4 there. We also want to meet with the students before school starts. So that's the meeting that we have kind of struggled the last few years to connect with students. So students really need to reach out to us because we don't know who's doing CCP. You turn in the stuff and then some students do it, some don't. So students need to contact us in early August, sit down with us, talk about their schedule and what they're planning on taking here and what they're planning on taking through CCP. And that's the one that we've kind of had some hit and miss on the last couple of years. So if you can encourage your student to do that, that's a very important part. And then we also want to meet with students again in December so we can figure out what their plan is for the spring semester. Each time we meet with them, we're going to do a credit audit, making sure they're on track to graduate from high school. That's our job, is to make sure that they have all the credits to get that high school diploma. It's icing on the cake that they can take away some college credits as well. We want to make sure that with their class, they're able to walk and receive that diploma in May of their graduation year. Also with Tri-C, we have to send in an authorization to attend. So students need to communicate with us what classes and how many credit hours they're taking so we can get that form in. If that form is not in and they go to sit down with their advisor at Tri-C, they're like, we can't help you. The authorization to attend form isn't in. So you have to let us know before you head there to schedule classes what you're thinking so we can help that move along for you. So a couple different names that came up here in the last few years as a lot of the colleges and secondary education institutes went to online is synchronous and asynchronous. To be honest, a word I haven't really used much before the last couple years. The asynchronous classes really don't have a certain time that they meet. It's kind of like that online anytime type, and the synchronous classes can be online, but they have a time to meet. So they may meet at 2 or 3 days a week for specific hours and times, and students here can't be in a class during that time then. So sometimes these classes end up taking up 2 periods. So a lot of times what we have students do is take all their CCP classes in the morning or in the afternoon, and then they just take those online opposite of what they're taking here at school. So that's why it's really important to meet and talk with the counselor. The tricky part about this is we don't really know what our high school schedule is going to look like until late in the summer. The scheduling process starts in early January, beginning of February. We've already been behind the scenes working on it for a couple months now. But we don't really lock things in because the administration is sharing resources between the middle school and high school. We're trying to get all the information from students. It's really a student-driven schedule based on their requests. And we try to maximize our resources that we have. So if they need to add a teacher or reassign a teacher based on the request, that the school has a chance to do that. So it really doesn't get locked in until midsummer. So that's why that meeting is very important in August, so we can really see what's available and how your schedule is going to look. So those online anytime classes, what the university's found, and Greg will probably touch on this, is that those online anytime classes, students kind of struggled with those, didn't do as well. I think students didn't realize the time commitment of those classes. So if you're in a 3 credit hour class, like a normal class, you're kind of expected to do the rule of thumb back when a couple of years ago when I was in school was 3 hours for every hour that you're in school. So if you're there for 3 hours, you're supposed to do 9 hours of homework outside the class. Well, students weren't even spending 3 hours online a week, and they were wondering why they were falling behind. And it's like they weren't putting the time into it. Instead of the 12 hours, which was kind of recommended, they were spending about an hour and a half, 2 hours, and just didn't realize what really was they had to do to be successful in that class. So we're seeing a limited availability in those classes, especially certain classes. They're not doing away with them completely, but those, again, would have to be done outside of the building here. We don't have a place for students to go and be able to communicate and talk live to anybody. If they're the online anytime classes and they have a study hall, they're certainly welcome to work on them there. We just don't have a place to supervise or have people be able to do those synchronous classes in the building. Okay, the mature content form came out a couple years ago as well. I just found out the other day everybody was blaming Hudson for that. It wasn't actually Hudson's fault. It was in the works before that. So these are high school students taking college classes. And that's always been a concern, is what's the content like? Well, it's college content, so it is some mature content. They will be in classes, or potentially in classes with adults, people our age. So the discussion, that the topics are going to be college level. So parents and students sign this form. The universities are it's on them to do that. Highland has decided to do it as well. So we keep a copy of that form here, just kind of as some redundancy built in there just for everyone's knowledge that everyone's on the same page. So we will pass that along to the universities, and we keep a copy here. So that's a requirement for the program. The CCP, this is up there because that's the folder that links to the Google Drive. So Brian has just been amazing on these meetings, and last year this was remote, and I was sitting in my office here, but it was being streamed out live, and the year before that I think I was in my den at home and doing this meeting, and Greg was in his office, and Danielle came in and was helping us. We've done this meeting last couple of years several different ways. Very nice to be back in person with everyone. But that's going to be, we've kept the online stuff and the options to access all the forms. So that whole packet is actually online as well in that folder. So you'll be able to click on that, and we'll have that link on hls.media here for you to access, and we'll also have it off of our school counseling webpage. That's how we did it. We're able to do that, yes. I don't do that part. There's someone that knows more about computers than me that does that, so they will take care of it. So some frequently asked questions that we get is, Should I do CCP or AP? That's probably one of the biggest questions because Highland is an AP College Board SAT type school, PSAT. So that's a very popular question. We have over 20 AP classes. Mrs. Lakins spent her entire spring in this building, I think most nights until about 3 or 4 in the morning, organizing over 600 tests. It was like over 630 tests, right? She's blushing because but she did. It was an incredible amount of work and did a great job with it. But we gave over 630 AP tests, which are great. That's a lot of potential to get college credit. So it really is, the answer is it depends. College Credit Plus is, like I said, a wonderful program for a lot of students. Some students that are looking to go to like Case Western, Ohio State, Worcester, they like the AP classes better. About any other school, John Carroll, BW, all the state schools have to take the classes and accept them. Where they apply sometimes can be a little bit different in their major, but all the state schools have to take them. And we're seeing most privates taking them too. They become a lot more favorable to CCP. I talked to the advisor at John Carroll not too long ago, and he said those CCP classes are college classes. We're going to take them like transfer credits from anyone else. So like I said, they're very favorable. But that's why we want to advise your student on what's best. So some students go very heavy CCP, some go very heavy AP, some to kind of do a mixture. It really depends on where the student's wanting to head. Should I schedule class at the high school? Yes. So when we start the scheduling process, even though you know you're going to take English Comp 1 at Tri-C or Akron, we still want you to schedule an English class here. A lot of things happen in the spring and summer and into the start of the school year. So it's a lot easier for us to go from 30, 31 students in a class and break it down to 29, 28 than trying to put somebody into a class that already has 31 or 32 in it. So like I said, we really wanted to do a student-driven schedule so it's much easier and it works out in everyone's favor to be able to bring the numbers down a little bit. We're not bringing them down to like under 25. So trust me, the classes are full. We're using the resources as best we can. But we want to make sure that works out for all the students involved there. So yes, you'll turn that in and we clean it up in the fall. What CCP classes should I choose? That's one of the big questions you always get. So kind of the first level I say is you want to make sure that the classes are going to meet high school graduation requirements. So some students will take government, they'll take econ, they'll take English Comp 1 and 2. They're taking classes that are going to count for high school credit and high school graduation requirements. A step up from that is making sure that those are meeting general education requirements. So the way it's set up now, those are level 1, correct, Greg? So level 1 classes are really those gen ed requirements. You have to take, I won't steal Greg's thunder here, but you have to take so many of those classes before you can take level 2. So you're kind of required to take the gen ed to begin with. To really optimize, if you know what you want to do, and that's like we're asking a 15, 16-year-old, what do you want to do for the next 55 years of your life? Kind of a tough question since they haven't really experienced a whole lot of life yet and had those experiences to be able to decide that and answer that question. If you can do that and you know what you want to go into, and that's very few students, then you can actually print that off right from the university and start picking off those classes one for one. And there's some websites that can help do that, and Greg will explain those as well. So that's kind of the best way to optimize your experience there. Do you have to meet with your high school counselor? Yes, 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 and yes, I think I have up there. So in the spring, in August, in the fall, and as I said for Tri-C, they need that authorization to attend. And what's the best grade to do it? And Greg will probably touch on that a little bit too. Again, kind of depends. Each situation is a little different. The vast majority of our students, and even statewide, and the University of Akron and Tri-C and Akron are a little different, but very, very similar. It's going to be juniors and seniors that are taking it. It just fits into their schedules better. They're getting all those high school requirements out of the way in their freshman and sophomore year, and then their schedule kind of opens up, has a little more flexibility, and those classes tend to kind of count one for one better. English Comp 1 and 2 fit very well for English 11 and 12. If you take them earlier on, then it's like, well, what English class are you going to take next? And Akron does, and Tri-C does, have some options, but it just doesn't flow and kind of mesh as well if they started early. But again, not discouraging it, but typically juniors and seniors are going to be the ones. So next step, meet with your counselor. So the students should be meeting with the counselor. We're certainly happy to answer questions as well for parents. And then follow that checklist, that first page in that packet. If you follow that checklist, you can't go wrong. One of the confusing parts is sometimes there are middle school parents here, and I imagine there's probably some here tonight, so that's why we say fill out your middle school schedule as well. But that's mostly going to be high school, so they fill out that high school schedule, and then we can kind of get going from there and help them build what their 4-year plan is for the high school. So, all right. So next we're going to have Greg Derringer come up from the University of Akron and do his part, and then we'll let Danielle kind of bring us home at the end there. I'll get Greg's going here.
Okay, and Jim was actually being modest there. He called me the guru, but he did a really good job, as well as the counselors here at Highland are very knowledgeable. So you're in good hands with kind of knowing what the requirements are and what's going to be expected of students in College Credit Plus. So as Jim said, my name is Greg Derringer. I'm the director for the College Credit Plus program. So I'm actually going to kind of do 2 parts. So the first part is just giving you some broad and general information that's going to be applicable to any of the colleges or universities that you may be considering. And then I'll kind of wrap up with University of Akron specific information as far as our eligibility requirements, the application process, so that you have everything that you need to know if you are considering the University of Akron. And as Jim mentioned that the majority of the Highland students do seem to tend to gravitate towards Akron as well as Tri-C, but in theory you can apply to any participating colleges or universities in the state of Ohio. So by law that does include any of the state universities as well as any of the community colleges, and then most private colleges, universities also participate in CCP. So that's where the general information will come into play. So a good starting point, just to kind of give you some background, so what the College Credit Plus program is specifically designed for. So this is actually a state legislated, state mandated program. So this is written into Ohio law that we offer the opportunity for College Credit Plus. A lot of times we hear from families like, oh, this is this brand new program. No, it's not. It was in existence prior to 2015 when the state rebranded it as College Credit Plus. Prior to that, it was actually called Post-Secondary Enrollment Options, or PSEOP, which had been in existence since 1999. Take that back, 1989. So it has been in the state of Ohio for decades. What the state did, though, was they kind of changed around some of the requirements. One of the big ones that they changed was they opened the program up all the way down to the 7th grade. So that's where the middle school component comes into play here. With that being said, though, all students, whatever their grade level is, does have to qualify for eligibility based on the state requirements, which you're going to hear me explain, as well as then meet the admissions requirements for any of the colleges or universities that they're applying to. But the big benefit of the program is that the students are earning dual credit. So the credit that they receive is college credits, obviously, because you're taking a college class through whichever college or university that you're participating, and then that college credit transfers back to the school and counts as high school credit. So that's why it's a dual credit. So if a middle schooler is actually taking the courses, it's kind of like triple credit, because technically it is high school credit, so on their transcript it's going to count towards high school graduation requirements, but in theory they could also be using that to substitute some of the middle school classes that they're taking then. So that's oftentimes why College Credit Plus is referred to as a dual credit program. The other big benefit is that it is going to be funded. So when a student participates in College Credit Plus, their tuition and fees for any of the college classes that they're taking are provided through state funding. So when a student's coming from a public school, the state's basically kind of shifting some of the funds that would normally come to Highland here to contribute towards the student's secondary education. That then transfers to the college or university that they're attending to contribute to their tuition expenses. And then textbooks, which students, I know you're not aware of this, parents, you probably are, textbooks, which are another significant expense, are actually paid for by the school district. So out of pocket, tuition fees, textbooks are paid for through the student's participation then. So you can really think of College Credit Plus really almost like a scholarship opportunity, because those are future college expenses that are going to be paid for and done and out of the way before the student has even graduated from high school. Okay, so advantages. So probably the number one advantage that I always share with students and families is the opportunity to already have taken some college credits. So as Mr. Addington said earlier, a lot of times the courses you're taking are specifically to also fulfill some high school graduation requirements, but those are also the same core subject areas that students are going to need at the college level regardless of where they attend. So students, you probably thought you were going to be done with these subject areas, but guess what? Every college student has to take some type of English or writing. Every college student has to take some type of math. Every college student has to take some type of social studies or social sciences. So already having some of those credits out of the way helps you to stay on track once you then have graduated from high school and are a full-time college student seeking your degree out of high school then. So it helps you to stay on track. It even can help to accelerate. We now, this year, very excited, a Highland High School student will be our second student in the history of College Credit Plus to earn a bachelor's degree at the same time as he is graduating from high school this spring. Now that is very rare, I will say that. Most students at the same time as they're graduating from high school probably have between maybe 15 to 20 total college credits. So they usually have the equivalent of maybe one full college semester, maybe pushing 2 full college semesters completed and out of the way at the same time as they're graduating from high school. But it is, sky's the limit depending on how early you'd want to start. So that's where if you do start as an underclassman or even as a middle schooler, there are opportunities for you to get way further ahead, but that is an exception to the rule in reality for most CCP students. So academically, numerous advantages when you participate. Just a couple more things with fees, and I'll talk about the top one here a little bit more in depth here a little bit later on. But the state does have some parameters. As I mentioned earlier, tuition and fees and textbooks are paid for up front. The state does stipulate if students do not complete a class either by failing or withdrawing, they're responsible for repaying their school district the amount of state funds that paid for that class. And then one of the few upfront expenses is if the student is attending classes on a college campus, they're driving themselves, and they're parking on that college campus, which has a parking fee. That's one of the few only expenses that is not covered for the student's participation. So at Akron, for example, the Akron campus, we do charge for parking. Out at our Medina campus, south of town, and then also at our Wayne College campus, we don't charge for parking. Daniel, how about at Tri-C? Are there parking? So is not covered at Tri-C. I know at Kent State, they also charge for parking. So it would depend on the institution if there are parking fees, and that would be the student's responsibility. So that's one of the few upfront expenses that a student might incur. The state did want us to emphasize this a little bit more. There are 2 different options. So the dual credit option that I mentioned, and it's funny, I've heard people in the state say this before, not sure why they didn't make that option A, because that's the funded dual credit option, but they reversed it. So that's actually option B. Option A is a self-pay option, so a student does have the choice. If they and their family would prefer, they can pay for their tuition expenses and textbooks. Everybody wants to jump and do that right away, right? Yeah. So it's kind of interesting why this is even defined this way. One of the reasons why, and I'll be honest with you, since the transition to College Credit Plus in 2015 from the old post-secondary program, we have never had a student upfront select option A. One of the ways that it does come into play, which you'll hear me talk about here in a moment, is if a student does exceed the total number of credits that the state will pay for. So I'll come back to that one, but initially when you are applying, you're all going to be applying under option B, which is the fully funded dual credit option, okay? You already heard about this one. So the state deadline that you're required to inform your school district that you're interested in CCP is April 1st. But as you heard, that is a Saturday. So your counselors are going to require you to actually turn in that intent form by March 31st. And as Mr. Addington said, if you want to turn those in tonight or you want to turn it in the very near future, that's perfectly fine. Just make sure it is turned in by that March 31st date. If a student misses that deadline, the district can actually deny your participation under option B. So I guess technically that's a way where option A could come into play, is if you miss that intent deadline, the district will not approve your funding for that year then. Okay, now you can appeal that to the principal and the superintendent, but do yourself a favor, get your forms in so those are taken care of. All right. So how do students participate? So there's kind of multiple steps. The first step is students must meet eligibility. So this is actually defined by the state. So there's a couple different ways that students can meet eligibility. One of the first ways is by their grade point average. And this is actually a brand new rule that the state actually put into law last February. And what this law stipulates is that if a student has a 3.0 unweighted cumulative, now listen very closely to me, unweighted cumulative high school GPA 3.0, you meet qualifications for eligibility. Notice I said high school GPA. So the only way a middle school student could qualify with just a grade point average is if they have taken a class in middle school that counts for high school credit, which would give them an established high school GPA, which I'm sure in the district here, correct me if I'm wrong, counselors, do you have algebra that counts for high school credit? Okay, 8th grade or 7th grade? Not GPA. Oh, not GPA. Interesting. Okay.
Algebra, geometry, and then the languages at the middle school all count for high school credit. It's not started with GPA.
Very interesting. So what your counselor clarified there, so the state, see, they're great with passing stuff without thinking through sometimes for the districts, is those count for high school credit, but there's no GPA attached to it. So technically, even then, middle schoolers, even having taken those classes, would not have an established high school GPA. So your second way that you can qualify then is by meeting a college readiness score on some type of a standardized test. And the standardized tests are defined by the state, so I'll go to those in a moment here, but there is another GPA potential qualification. The state also has indicated that if a student does have at least a 2.75 to a 2.9999, so just below a 3.0, again, unweighted cumulative high school GPA, colleges and universities can evaluate that student individually, look at their high school transcript, and determine if they would then qualify for eligibility and not need to take a standardized test. So that's up to each individual college or university how they're going to look at that student then. So if a student has at least a 2.75 high school GPA, I would still encourage them to apply and then get your materials into that college or university. They'll let you know then if they do need testing. Okay, so that's a GPA. Second way that a student could qualify is if they take some type of a standardized test and meet then what's called college readiness. So on this slide here, you see some of those standardized tests. So one of the ones we can all think of for college admission is the ACT or SAT. So those are standardized tests, but depending on the institution, they may also administer some type of a placement test. AccuPlacer is a very common one that a lot of our colleges in Ohio utilize. So depending on that college or university, they may allow the student then to take some type of a standardized ACT or SAT or placement test to determine if they also can qualify for admission that way. So that could also be a student who has below a 2.75 GPA. If they meet a qualifying score on a test, they can also qualify for eligibility. And I'll show you, I think I have a slide later where it runs through the ACT and SAT score requirements. I don't have it right here. So I can tell you off the top of my head, ACT test, for example, the qualifying scores for college readiness are the sub-scores. So the English sub-score, if students have an 18, that qualifies for eligibility. If they have a sub-math score of 22, that qualifies for eligibility, or a sub-score on the reading test of a 22, that qualifies for eligibility. So those are state standards that they have in place. So this is your first step. You have to meet eligibility to participate. If you know you're going to meet those eligibility standards, you then are going to apply to the college or university that you're considering, and you must then meet the admissions requirements for those universities. Now, sometimes for institutions, so for example, at the University of Akron at Tri-C, if you meet eligibility, you also meet the admissions requirements for that institution. So the admissions and eligibility are kind of tied together there. But you do then have to formally apply to that university. For some reason, you would think all the years that we've been doing CCP, students forget this is the most important, well, I guess second most important step. First important step is to turn in the intent form to the school. Second most important step is you have to apply to the university that you're going to take classes. At all of our institutions, that typically is an online application. So that's the first and foremost thing that you need to do. And then there may be additional credentials that you have to turn in. So you heard from Mr. Addington already. One of those credentials is now what's called a permission slip. That's a standardized form by the state that all colleges and universities have to accept. And that permission slip, again, is acknowledging that you're taking a college class that potentially could have mature content in it. So students and parents both need to sign that one then. And then an additional thing that after the student is admitted, the state also requires students, so this is students only, to complete a 2-question questionnaire. Basically, the student is saying, I understand I'm taking college classes. I have, number 1, the maturity, number 2, the responsibility to be taking a college level course. So those are a couple things tied into the enrollment. And then lastly, once a student has turned in all their credentials, they meet eligibility, they meet the admissions requirements for that university, they're going to get an acceptance letter from that university, and then the final step is to complete course registration. Now, each university kind of manages that differently. At Akron, we do have formal orientation programs that students attend. Once they've attended that orientation, they meet with a college advisor who assists them with their specific course registration. So each university might have a slightly different process of how they manage that, but just make sure that you're paying attention to any and all information that you receive. Students, this is the first time you'll hear me say this tonight, it is critical that you are using and checking, more importantly, checking email. It is the number 1 method of communication. You're not going to get a lot of stuff in the mail from most of the universities. It will be via email. Parents and family members, please do not put your email for your students' email. There oftentimes are sections where students can add parent emails so that you can be copied on things, but it is critical that the students have their own personal email, and we oftentimes recommend do not use your school email. Here at Highland, can your students receive external emails? Okay, so they can. Some school districts, you can only send email internally. So that's why it's critical. Students, if you do not have an email address yet, you need to create a Gmail or your own personal email address, and that's what you should be using on college applications when you're applying to them, okay? So pay attention to those instructions that you're gonna get. You heard about this earlier. So there are specific courses that CCP students can and cannot take. This is another state law. This was implemented about 3 years ago, and this is oftentimes referred to as the level 1 or the first 15 credit rule. And what this means is as a brand new College Credit Plus student, there's specific courses that you can take within your first 15 credits. Those courses defined by the state are transferable courses. So I'll describe those first. So transferable courses are identified by the state of Ohio. They have a specific designation. So some of our courses we call, actually this has slightly changed. We used to call it Ohio Transfer Module. It's now called Ohio Transfer 36. These are courses for any of the state universities and community colleges which are guaranteed to be accepted by all of our institutions. So if you take English Composition 1 at Akron, we know that that's going to transfer, Tracy, you call it college writing? Is that right? Yeah, okay. So those are the equivalent courses at our institutions. The state says you have to accept those between your 2 institutions. So that's one type of transferable course. Another type of transferable course is called a Transfer Assurance Guide or TAG course. Oftentimes, those are an introductory course in a specific major. So I'll give you a good example of that. Foundation Drawing 1 at the University of Akron in our School of Art is a TAG course that if you take that at our school, it's going to transfer as an art course to any of the other state universities in Ohio. So that's another category. And then your final category are Career Technical Assurance Guide courses. Those are oftentimes career and technical courses. So they could be in a field like computer information systems or something like that. So guaranteed to transfer to any of the state schools and community colleges. And then the state does also allow, even if they're not identified as a transferable course, any courses in computer science or information technology, any courses in anatomy and physiology, and any courses in foreign languages, including sign language, are acceptable within the first 15 credits. So that's the level 1 first 15 credit rule. Once a student has completed 15 credits, it's sky's the limit, and as long as they meet the placement requirements or have completed the necessary prerequisite courses at the college level, they can then take any courses, whether they're identified as a level 1 or not then. And I love the state's definition of level 2. It simply just says any course that's not level 1. So once you have your 15 credits done, you can move on into other advanced courses then. Okay, non-allowable courses. So by non-allowable, what this means is the state will not pay for these. And this is regardless of if the student has 15 credits or not. The state will not pay for any one-on-one privately instructed courses. The state will also not pay for any phys ed courses or any remedial or basic courses that do not count for college credit. So depending on a student's background and placement, when they enroll at a college or university, for example, if they don't place right into college level writing or composition, they may have to take a basic writing course that doesn't count for college credit. Those cannot be taken through CCP because the whole premise of the program is you're taking a college level course that counts for college credit. So at no time will the state pay for any of the courses in these categories. Now, in some cases, this is where kind of the option A comes into play a little bit, and we've had students do this in our program at Akron. We have a student who knows they want to major in music. So as part of their music degree, they have to take music lessons in their specific instrument. So the student's going to major in oboe. They want to take oboe lessons, not paid for through CCP, so that student then chooses to self-pay to take those one-on-one privately instructed courses. Okay. Now notice phys ed is on here too. Do I have any Akron alum in the audience? Okay, so remember back in the day we had to take a phys ed or wellness class? Students, you don't know how easy you have it now. No longer required for any of the state universities in Ohio. You're not going to have to take phys ed. So makes no sense. The state will not pay for them. Makes no sense for you to self-pay for that course because it's going to count as an empty elective credit, which counts towards nothing at the college level. So if you need to do your PE, do it right here at Highland High School, okay? So that's a quick overview of your allowable and non-allowable there. All right, now class selection. Many of the classes that students are taking, Mr. Addington said this earlier, are in those core subject areas. So we have #1 enrolled course at any of the state universities and community colleges in Ohio is English composition. Like something like 90% of CCP students throughout the entire state take English. Beyond that, lots of social sciences, so government, psychology, history. Students taking math, foreign languages, science classes. So again, if you're a brand new student, you just have to make sure they fit into those level 1 categories. And then after you've got your 15 credits done, you can expand and you can jump into, if you know exactly what you want to major in college, you can begin those introductory courses once you have 15 credits completed. Okay, and I already talked about this one earlier, so the state law does mandate that you have to turn in that permission slip as part of your application to any universities, and then there is a two-question questionnaire that students have to complete after admission. So just as you see stuff like that, just know those are state requirements there. Now, does that mean that every college class has mature content and subject matter in it? No. But is there sometimes going to be some content that's discussed in classes that may not be discussed at the high school level? Absolutely. So it just depends on the class, what the subject areas are. So the way the law is written is that that content will not be altered regardless of what the student's age is. So you're simply signing off on that you're acknowledging that there could be some of that content in classes. All right. So let's talk a little bit about differences between high school and college. Testing, one of the big differences that we see. Now, this is not all college classes. I know sometimes you think of college that there's, it's this, regimented and real strict environment where you don't have a lot of tests, but there are some classes at the college level where maybe there are only 4 tests and a final and that's it. Whereas in high school, you're used to coming from an environment where you've got, tests more frequently, so that could be one of the differences there. Could be difference in study time. Mr. Addington did a good job talking about the online classes with this. One of the biggest shocks for students is college classes don't meet 5 days a week. So if you have an in-person class, at the most it might meet 4 days a week, but usually they're 3 or 2 days a week. So there's a greater amount of time actually spent on studying outside of class time than inside of class time. So that's a big difference there. Knowledge acquisition, so very similar to what I just said about the testing. Sometimes there's an expectation that students are reading their textbook, doing assignments and activities outside of class time, which is different from in high school because you do spend time in class Monday through Friday, so oftentimes you're able to get a lot more things completed inside of the class then. So that's a big difference there. And then you already heard me talk about grades earlier, that sometimes there's less frequency of actually graded assignments. In a college class, the instructor might assign homework for you, and they don't grade it, which is a shock to students. Then they think, oh, I don't have to do that then. you need to do it because you're not going to do well on your tests and quizzes then. So very, very different depending on how the classes are structured. And then roles of parents, this is a big one. Do you have progress book here at Highland? What's it? Oh, Power School. Okay, so you call it Power School here, right? So parents, you have access to your students' grades 24/7, right? Not the case at the college level. We are actually governed by the federal FERPA, which is the Family Educational Rights and Privacy Act, FERPA. What that stipulates is regardless of age, if a student is enrolled in a college class, their records and information is solely for them unless they give written permission for an individual, even including a parent, to have access to that information. So it's a very, very different process. So expect that when your students are enrolling, you can't pick up the phone and call their college professor like you could potentially call the school here and talk to a high school teacher. So very, very different environment for that. And then lastly, accommodations. If a student is on an IEP or a 504 plan, that does not automatically transition to the college or university that the student is attending. So students do then need to actually register with an accessibility officer department at the college or university that they're attending so they can have an assessment done to see if there are services and accommodations that they're eligible for at the college level. Now, in most cases, students will receive some accommodations, but they may not be exactly the same as what they were receiving in the high school. So make sure that you are communicating with the college or university so that you can get that paperwork processed. Grades. So as we said earlier, you're enrolled for dual credit. So the courses that you're taking at the college level transfer back to the high school, and they're actually then calculated right into the high school GPA. So they're put right onto the high school transcript. And based on the state rules, if your school has an advanced placement or an honors class that has a weighted grade in the same subject area of that course, you also get a weighted grade then in that CCP course. So a great example, I know you have AP English here at Highland High School. So if you take English composition, which you heard me say earlier, 90% of CCP students take English. When that transfers back to the school, it's going to be weighted the same as if it was an advanced placement or AP class here at the school. So that way, it's a level playing field whether you're doing AP at the school or you're doing CCP. Probation and dismissal. So this is another state policy. So at all times, College Credit Plus students are required to maintain at least a 2.0 grade point average to remain participating in the program. So what happens is if a student falls below a 2.0 or if they withdraw from 2 or more classes in a given semester, they're eligible to be placed on probation. And the state stipulates that if a CCP student is on probation, they are still eligible to continue, but the following semester they may only take 1 course. And if in the previous semester they earned any grades of D or F, that 1 course cannot be in the same subject area as those courses that they earned a D or F. So let's say the student was only taking English, they got a D, that's going to be a 1.0 GPA, which flags them for probation. Next semester they can take 1 course, but it cannot be an English course. And then the student has the following semester to improve their GPA to get back up over a 2.0 to avoid being dismissed or removed from the program. Now, I know these requirements here sound pretty strict, but I always stress to our students, your number 1 priority when you participate in CCP is to graduate from high school. So the worst thing that could happen is the student performs poorly, fails courses that they need for high school graduation, and then it's a double whammy because you've got poor grades on your college transcript, and potentially it could be preventing you from graduating from high school. So that's why the state is very strict with these academic policies. And then credit limit. So there is a maximum number of credits that can be taken in the school year. That maximum number of credits is 30. So the way that the state calculates this is that the 30 credits is not just high school credits, it includes, or I'm sorry, not just college credits, it also includes high school credits. So there is a conversion of credits. So any college course that's equal to 3 or more college credits, when that transfers back to the high school, it fulfills 1 full high school credit, or vice versa. Anytime a student is still taking a high school course in their calculation, that 1 high school credited course counts as 3 college credits. So I'll show you on this slide how this is actually calculated. So let's look at the blue box at the bottom here. So let's say next school year, your student's gonna do CCP, and they're enrolled in 5 full high school credits here at the school. To equate that to college credits, you simply multiply it by 3 because 1 high school credit equals 3 college credits. So 5 times 3 is 15. 30 credits is the maximum that the state will pay for in a given year. So in this example, subtract 15 from 30, and the student has 15 total college credits they have for the entire year's participation in CCP. The year for participation, by the way, always starts in the summer, followed then by the fall semester and the spring semester. So they can spread those 15 credits out over the entire school year. This is where the option A, option B comes into play a little bit, because if a student exceeds their credit limit, and typically that doesn't happen until the spring semester, which starts in January. So if they go over their limit, they need to either adjust their high school or college schedule to go back down below 30 credits, or they have the option to self-pay. When they self-pay, it is going to be the regular tuition rate for that university that they're attending. And we work closely with your counselors here to ensure students are staying within these limits, so luckily that one doesn't happen a lot there. All right, and then lastly, options after high school. So typically when a student stays at the same institution that they're doing CCP, so if a student starts with us at Akron and they want to continue on and pursue a degree after high school graduation, they do have to formally reapply, but their transcript has already started with us and it just continues right along. If they're going to another university, though, it is the student's responsibility when they apply to those other universities to disclose on their application that they've attended Akron, they've attended Tri-C, or whatever the university or institution may be, and then submit an official transcript to that school. That school will then evaluate it and determine how their credits transfer. So I'm going to leave you with two websites here that you can use to check on transferability. The first one is the State of Ohio website. So this is only for state universities and community colleges. So it's the transfercredit.ohio.gov/students. When you go to this website, you're going to actually click on, it's a little fuzzy there, college transfer tools. And then from there, it's actually a search tool where you can plug in where you're attending, select subject areas, and then it will pull up the entire list of all of the state universities and community colleges to show you how your credits transfer. So, sorry, this one, it's really washed out on here. What this is, it's a list of all the schools. So I've expanded students attending Akron, English composition, and this is expanded for Bowling Green, and you can see the equivalent English courses that it would transfer and equate to if the student was going to Bowling Green then. So you can use this for any of the state schools. Another website that you can use is transferology.com. This one is much, much more comprehensive. It's not just for state schools and community colleges in Ohio. It includes private schools, it includes out-of-state schools. Big difference between the websites though. The previous state website, you can go to it and just start searching. On Transferology, you do have to create an account first, and then it operates in exactly the same way. What I've done in this slide here, I skipped the search steps, but on the left-hand side is Akron's English course. On the right-hand side is the equivalent English courses at Ohio State. So these are tools that you can use to check transferability. My advice to you, though, is for any schools that you're considering, it's never too early to contact those schools and find out what their policies are. So I would get on the phone early and let them know, I'm interested in CCP, I'm going to be doing it at Tri-C, I'm going to be doing it at Akron. What are your policies on accepting credits? Because, again, the advantage is you want to make sure that the credits that you're taking are going to apply toward your future goals. Okay? So that's the general information. I'm going to transition real quick here, and then we'll let Danielle go to talk about Tri-C. But specifically for the University of Akron, you heard Mr. Addington say this earlier, you've got a variety of different options, so students can come to campus, and you're kind of equal distance in the Highland District here. You could come to the Akron campus, or the second closest would be go to the Medina Center, which is just south of Medina on Route 162. So if you're looking for the campus experience, either of those locations are probably going to be the closest for you. Probably what we've seen the most in the past couple years for Highland students, though, is taking online classes. So I just throw that caution out again that you also heard from Mr. Addington. If you're going to take an online class, please, please, please consider the time commitment for those. Also consider the communication that is required. Because if you're taking an asynchronous class that doesn't meet on designated days and times, if you need clarification on something, you're going to have to email your professor or ask them to maybe meet via video conference if you need some help or assistance with something. So that's where students and parents, you'll probably know this best, if the student is the type of student that has to be constantly reminded to do things, and when maybe they have assignments for class, I see some snickering in the front here, then an online class is probably not the best option for you, okay? So as a family, you kind of want to talk through those things and decide them together, okay? All right. Admissions and eligibility requirements for the University of Akron. In the materials when you came in, there is a handout for the University of Akron. It has these blue and gold boxes on it. So if you didn't get that when you came in, make sure you do get one before you leave this evening. As far as eligibility, as I said earlier, if a student meets the eligibility for the state, they're also going to meet the admissions requirements for the University of Akron. So that is either the 3.0 unweighted cumulative high school GPA or one of the qualifying test scores. And again, middle school students, if you do not have a designated high school GPA already established, you would then need to take either the ACT or the SAT test. And I've got the test dates on a slide coming up here. So that's going to be your eligibility requirements. To apply to the University of Akron, simple process. Number one, again, complete the online application. In addition to that, you need to request your high school transcript, which you heard from Mr. Addington is going to be sent through Naviance. In addition to that, there is the permission slip, and then Akron does have a second form called a signature page, which requires a student, parent, and also counselor signature. So those are found together on the website, so you can print those off and complete those together, turn them into your counselor so that they can also send those through Naviance with your transcript. And then lastly would be test scores if needed, if that's applicable to you. Our application deadlines for Akron, if you're applying for either the summer or the fall, those deadlines are April 15th. If you're applying for the spring, that application deadline is October 15th. Just keep in mind that intent to participate form is good for the entire upcoming year. So if a student did want to apply for spring in October, if you didn't turn in your intent form the previous March, you're out of luck for applying under option B for that spring semester. And then here are the test dates. Big thing I'm going to point out here is you see ACT at the top, SAT at the bottom. Those are the national test dates. If a student can't make any of those national test dates, the University of Akron is an ACT test center, so students can take, we call it a residual or basically a university ACT, and it's outside of the national test dates. So you actually just call our testing center and you can schedule for them to take it on your own time then. And then a couple other steps here. You heard me say this earlier. So specifically at Akron, if a student is admitted into our program, you are going to attend an orientation program and register for classes with an advisor. And then just some general information to keep in mind. When you are taking especially online classes, those follow the college or university calendar. So they're not necessarily going to follow in a line sometimes with your high school calendar. So keep that in mind. Attendance is mandatory in your college classes. Grades are actually posted online. We don't send report cards. Do you send report cards here at Highland anymore? No, okay, so you've already stopped that at the high school level too. Some high schools still send report cards. Our grades are all electronic and online. So just some general information there. And then academic support services, you heard me say this earlier. The big one I would stress is if students are on an IEP or a 504 plan, you can register with our Office of Accessibility, and then they would assess if there are services you're eligible for at the college level. And then contacts, these are also on your handout. I'm the second Greg. I don't know, I always joke, I don't know if it's easier or more confusing. Greg Landis in the Office of Admissions, he actually is your point person as you're going through the application process. And then after you're admitted, he's going to hand you off to me, and then I'll help you out with the rest of your process once you're enrolled into the program then. So if you call the University of Akron and ask for Greg and CCP, one or the two of us is going to be able to help you out. Okay, so I know we're running a little bit over on time, so I'm going to pass it off to Danielle then to talk specifically about Tri-C, and then we'll open it up for any questions that you have.
Alrighty. Well, good evening, everybody. My name is Danielle Schwager. I am a recruiter at Tri-C. I work at our Western campus in Parma. I will be the shortest one you hear from tonight in terms of time, so it'll just be a couple of minutes. But I don't work all the time with CCP students, but I'll be able to answer a lot of your questions tonight. So if you have questions afterward, please know that Greg and I and your counselors will be here to answer those questions for you. So our locations are really beneficial, especially to students here in Highland. We have our Brunswick University Center right in front of Brunswick High School. Also, the Western campus in Parma, that feels very far away. It took me less than 30 minutes to get here tonight, so it's really not that far. And students can take classes at any Tri-C campus that they'd like. That includes some of our satellite campuses as well. So we know what CCP is, we know the benefits of CCP, but why would you choose CCP at Tri-C. So again, first, our locations are really beneficial. That's one of the best things that we offer. The formats, so online with set meeting times, in person. We also have hybrid classes that meet maybe once a week in person and the rest of the classes online. So if you only want to come once a week, but you still want that in person and online independent work, you have that flexibility. We have morning, afternoon, evening, weekend classes. So just like the University of Akron, a wide variety of options and times to fit your schedule. So if you're working around athletics, you're working around school activities, we have that flexibility. All of our student services that we would give to our typical entering college students, same goes for CCP. So that includes tutoring, our learning commons, things like that. At Tri-C, we also give every student a free RTA pass. So for those parents who have students who don't drive or don't have cars, if you want to drop them off and, in Strongsville at one of the RTA stops, they can actually then take the bus, take the rapid to get to any of our campus locations. Again, earning that Associate of Arts. And then our counselors work really closely with the counselors here at the high school. We've talked about some of the challenges. I think the biggest challenge is that in college, you have to advocate for yourself. So knowing that there's a lot of services available to you, but you have to ask for help in most cases, we're not just gonna necessarily seek you out for that. So if you know your student is not gonna be the one to speak up for themselves, this is a time to really think about that. So that's one of the challenges. And again, we've talked about balancing your high school activities with the college activities as well. Spring breaks are usually the biggest ones. They're never usually the same. And I see Mr. Addington and the counselors shaking their heads. So you might actually have 2 spring breaks. You're like, oh man, this is gonna be great. But then you're off of high school and still in college, and then off of college and still in high school. So you don't really actually get a spring break. So keep that in mind in some instances. We've talked about all of this. Student accessibility services, again, the best thing you can do is get a copy of your plan, set up a time with whichever office it is that you're working with at any of our institutions, and we will make sure we set up with those accommodations and what they look like at the college level, because again, they might not be the same, they might be similar. An example is at the high school, if you have an aide, you can bring an aide with you to college, but we won't provide one for you. So that's one of the examples of the differences in accommodations. FERPA is also huge. Every school has an electronic copy of that. So parents, this is a great time to have a conversation with your student about what that means. And this is true for any incoming new student after you graduate from high school anyways, they have to do this. So very much like HIPAA is for the medical field, FERPA is the college way of doing so. So for us, our preferred deadline is April 15th. Again, that intent to participate form, you're hearing it multiple times tonight because we really want to drill it into your head that that's a really important form. We have multiple pages in the back. I know some people were like, there's so many pages. I know. A couple of these are eligibility and placement in the admissions checklist, and then the other stuff we'll send you once your student gets admitted to Tri-C. So we have our online application. The mature content is included in that. Test scores, we have our own placement tests as well. If you don't have ACT, SAT scores, don't meet the GPA requirements, we will walk you through all of that as you work at Tri-C. Private school and homeschool students. Any private school homeschool in here? I think we're okay. Okay. Our registration process, again, once you're admitted, you will actually get a letter and a packet sent home to you with what to do next. The mature content questionnaire, meet with your school counselors to discuss what courses you want to be taking at Tri-C. The authorization to attend form is something that your counselor will help you submit to us with the outlined courses that you are able to take that semester. And then we have our counselors at Tri-C that you will work with to make sure you're picking out the classes in a format and way that is convenient for you as a student here at the high school level. Then you register, and our orientation happens a couple weeks before the start of the semester. So benefits of attending Tri-C after CCP, students don't actually have to reapply if they're an incoming new student. If they've taken CCP classes their junior, senior year, we will literally automatically admit you halfway through the spring semester. So you don't actually have to reapply as a new student. Ease of transfer, University of Akron, all the public schools in the state of Ohio have come together. There's a certain set of classes that are guaranteed to transfer. So if you know what public school is in your future, we're a great place to start. We work really closely with our partners to help you with that transfer process as a student. We have honors and scholars programs. We do have athletics at the college level, a lot of career preparation, clubs and organizations, study abroad. There's so many things that you can do at a community college that you can also do at the four-year institutions. Again, I'm not a coordinator, but we have really great coordinators at our campuses. At the Western campus, it's Melinda and Renee, and all of their contact information is listed there, and it's also listed in front of, on the pages that are here with you. And I think if Mr. Addington doesn't have anything else, he might have one or two more things to add. If we have any questions for the good of the order, and then we'll be available here to answer any questions at the end.
Right. You can go ahead.
Yeah, so the question is, what if the high school is closed but the college is open? You still have a college class. So if it's an online class, yes. If it's an in-person class, they would still be expected to show up to campus.
We don't have any classes here in the building. Right, the distance learning. We don't have that. Oh, you don't have that anymore?
Yeah, so you would still go to class. As much as we at the college level, I'm sure, would love a snow day. It doesn't always happen.
For like eligibility for sports and stuff like that. And yeah, so the OHSAA says that students have to take 5 credits or the equivalent. So since we are on semesters and give grades at semesters, that's 2.5 credits per semester. That's why I always tell students, don't count PE because that's only a quarter credit. So if that's your 5th class, not going to count. So to give you an example, if you were taking 5 full-year classes here, you're eligible. Most of our students take either 6 or 7. At the college level, since their credits are a little different than ours, a student could take 2 CCP classes, 1 full-year class at the high school, and technically be eligible with just those 3 classes. So you really want to, you'd have to take at least 3 college classes. 3 credit hour classes. Yeah, 2 credit hours are 0.66 and 1's 0.33, so it'd have to be 3 credit hour classes to be eligible, and also be considered a full-time student. Okay.
The conversion from weighted grades to unweighted grades, how does that work?
When students apply to college and then they unweight them, each school is going to do that a little differently, and so they'll take and try to make it as uniform as possible between, because our A's are different than other schools' A's. Right. Our grades, we have, yeah, ours are probably 95% of our students have over a 3-point. Correct. So that is the weighted grade that they're talking about there. Right. No, that's the 3.0 is weighted. It's a weighted high school grade. Right. Oh, it's unweighted? Oh, it is unweighted? Okay. Great. So we have a form that we could run a student's grades through for the unweighted. It doesn't, our computer system doesn't do that automatically. So we'd have to do that individually. A 4 or 5, they're well above, so they're fine. Yeah. They're usually, not, it depends on how many classes they've had that are AP, but yeah. Yeah. So that's something else. So freshmen actually would not have a GPA yet. They wouldn't have a GPA until after the first semester. One of the reasons why we actually clicked off that, I don't know, maybe your students are kind of a little anxious about that. We clicked that off on Power School because it's a fluid grade that changed every time a teacher changed the grade and put an assignment in, and our students were like way too obsessed with that in an unhealthy way, so we just clicked that off.
As far as eligibility, if you have a 3.0 unweighted, did I understand correctly that you don't need to worry about standardized tests?
Oops, yeah, shocked you. Good question there. I want to clarify that. So the question was, if you have the 3.0, does that mean you don't have to worry about a standardized test? No. So that's eligibility. Course Placement is a totally different thing. So if I'll use English as an example again. To take English at any of our institutions, students are going to have some type of a standardized test score. So if a student doesn't take the ACT or SAT because they have a 3.0, they're going to get flagged to do a placement test then through the university for that course placement. So English, social sciences, math, all are going to require some type of testing. They just may not have to take ACT or SAT for admission, placement testing later on down the road.
If they have a qualifying.
Yeah, good. Yeah, yeah. So the question was, if they do take ACT or SAT, do they have to take something for placement? Most times not, but if they don't have a qualifying score, that's where placement testing would kick in again. Yeah, good question about that. Yeah, I forgot to clarify that earlier. Yeah. Yeah, the magic question. It's up to you. Colleges, universities do not care one way or the other. So I would encourage, so the question was, is there a preference for ACT or SAT? I encourage students to do some practice testing in both to see how they perform before you register to take those tests, and then, take which one you feel is going to best meet your needs. Here at the high school, the state of Ohio, a number of years now pays for an administration of the ACT or SAT for all juniors in the state of Ohio. So this February here at Highland, so if your student is a junior this year, is it ACT you would? April SAT here at Highland High School. So if your student is a junior, that is acceptable then, could be used for eligibility purposes, for course placement, for whatever. But if the student's an underclassman and needs testing, it's going to be up to you to decide then. In general, I'm just speaking very broadly here, in Ohio, students tend to prefer to take the ACT, but again, that's a very broad statement there, so one student from the next might perform slightly different on one test versus the other.
I'm going to add something to that, if I could, please. Little pro tip here on that one. So we do give the SAT the junior year. We do encourage the students that when they take the PSAT, which all of your students should have done, to connect that to the Khan Academy, and that gives you prescriptive intervention on areas that they didn't do as well and can help them score better than on the SAT, especially their junior year when it counts. So we chose to do the SAT then their junior year because most students took the ACT on their own. So sometimes we see students will do a little better on one or the other, so we wanted to give them both. That way, whichever one they intend to do better on, then they can use that for college admissions. Along those same lines, one of the things with college admissions is they'll say, well, we're test optional for admission. That doesn't necessarily mean you're going to be accepted into certain programs or be eligible for certain scholarships without the SAT or ACT. So it's a little, there's a little more to the story there. So especially nursing programs.
Or the course placement that I mentioned. So that's a perfect statement there. So University of Akron, and I think almost all the four-year publics in Ohio have gone test optional for freshman admission. But we also know that every student in Ohio has taken the ACT or the SAT because of the state paying for it. So students somehow think it's going to be counted against them if they submit their score. And then once they find out from that university, you have to take a placement test. How quickly they are like, oh, I have ACT or SAT scores. So send your scores. It's not going to count against you to submit your scores.
And we're told that over and over when we go to articulation. That's one of the, they have all the state schools stand up there. You go to the private school when they all stand up, they all say, we do not look at it. If you tell us not to consider it, we don't consider it. I know everyone sits there and goes, I'm not sure I believe that. They tell us over and over again they don't. So that's all I can say.
And all the schools will use your highest placement option. So if we place you based on GPA, ACT, SAT, or placement score, let's say you had not so great an ACT score and then you take our placement test and you do stellar, we're going to use that. So we're going to use your best overall placement opportunity. So it can't hurt you. So the question was, basically, can you take CCP classes at more than one institution? Absolutely, even in the same semester. We'll have some students who would take one class at Akron and one class at Tri-C, or vice versa. Absolutely. And you can even go from semester to semester and go to different schools. That's not a problem. A lot of students don't do that, but you can, is the answer. Yes, you can do that. You can do more than one school. You are not locked in.
Just remember the 30 credit limit applies for all the schools
Yes.
combined. So.
And the CCP probation as well.
Right. Yes.
Yeah.
and that's how the majority of our students actually do it. It's just that way. They'll take an English Comp 1 online, or maybe first thing in the morning, come in third period, take the rest of their classes here. There's any combination of that. It's actually pretty rare for our students to take full-time CCP. We don't have a lot of students doing that because they want to stay connected here, their classes here, they want to take their teachers they want to have, their friends they want to have classes with, all that stuff. So that's actually how and it does work out pretty well. Like mathematically, it shouldn't, but when we sit down with those students in August, it always works out. I don't know how. I'm like always amazed. Every once in a while, they have to make a decision. Do I want to take an honors or an AP class? And sometimes they have to drop down to the honors level or up to the AP. But somehow it always works out. They just have to sit down with us and go through their options. And that's why most students are going to take English Comp. That's because they're going to work that in that way. And that's sometimes they only have maybe 2 or 3 classes in CCP. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yep. Right. We'll be as accessible as we can, or as flexible as we can. The only thing we cannot do is have a class overlap with one here, even by a minute. So it's like a student says, well, I'm only going to get to class 5 minutes late, 3 days a week. We can't do it because the 5 minutes always turns into 15, turns into 20, and they can't miss. Our rule of thumb has to be it cannot overlap. Things happen that they just end up missing too much class here. But other than that, students coming and going. We have a CCP, late arrival, early release, and even midday. I have a student right now that comes in for second period, leaves, and then comes back for 10th period for band because they're going CCP in between that. So, and that's perfectly acceptable. Hmm? Mm-hmm. Right. Right. Mm-hmm. Right. Right. The vast majority of colleges, it is looked on that way. That's why I just mentioned like Ohio State for admissions. We've seen that they really prefer the AP classes for Ohio State. They prefer 4 years of a language. It's 4.0 plus for GPA on the weighted. They want to see a 28, 29 plus on the ACT. That's our typical student getting into Ohio State. Same thing with like Worcester and Case Western. They really like those. All the other schools are very favorable towards CCP. I have to warn those because sometimes students come and they say, I want to be a Buckeye. No, that's my number one school. And I say, you might want to do some kind of a hybrid then because they're going to want to see you take some AP classes. Has been my experience. Right.
For the AP exams, typically most schools will say you have to score a certain level on the actual AP exam to get that credit. So that's also part of it as well. I think the biggest thing to also keep in mind is there's also going to be a difference between a student who wants to stay in state and a student who wants to go out of state. If you have a student who's like, I want to go to University of Alabama, awesome. Call the University of Alabama. Ask those questions to those schools because it is always up to the receiving institution to determine how they will accept credits from another school. So the biggest thing that your student can do is if they know that they're going to do this and then start somewhere after high school, call that institution. They'll be very upfront with you and tell you what they want or what they need.
We are seeing where even out-of-state schools are being much more favorable in the last couple of years.
Yeah, pretty much every state now has a similar type of program to College Credit Plus, so it is much more acceptable now. Private schools are the kind of the caution.
Yeah. Just call. Well, I think that's it. I'll let Mr. Addington wrap up, but if anyone has individual questions, come see us. We'll be down here.
Yep, very good. Yep, thank you very much for coming. As you know, you can always reach out to your child's school counselor. We'd be happy to answer any more questions. So have a good night.